It's now been over a week since 6-year-old Lily and her 4-year-old brother Jack Sullivan were reported missing from their rural Nova Scotia home. As we heard in the previous nighttime episode, on the morning of Friday, May 2nd, their mother and stepfather claimed that when they woke at around 10 a.m., the children weren't in the home, and there was no sign of where they may have went. What followed was a full-scale search unlike anything the community has ever seen. Dozens of agencies, hundreds of trained volunteers, police dogs, drones, helicopters, all converging on the forests and fields that surrounded the Sullivan kids' home. Yet as the days passed and no sign of the kids were found, the concern and the questions only built up upon themselves. How could two small children vanish in broad daylight without leaving a trace behind? Could this really be the children simply wandering off? Or did something else happen? In this episode, Madeleine Klein and I will break down what we now know after 1 week of unsuccessful searching. We'll cover key updates from the RCMP, statements made to the media by those close to the case, and we'll gain as much insight as we can from the early moments of the search thanks to access to the audio of the emergency dispatcher's call logs. So let's get into it. Tonight, in this episode of Nighttime, we'll again be asking the question, where are Jack and Lily Sullivan?
You are listening to the Nighttime Podcast.
A desperate search is underway tonight in Nova Scotia. Two siblings, aged just 4 and 6, are believed to have wandered away from their home on Friday morning and haven't been seen since.
Any officers they can get at the New Brunswick border, PI border, and get them at every airport possible.
I want to hold them, and I want them home.
Ms. Madeleine Klein, I'm here in Nova Scotia. Since we recorded our first episode on Monday, it's just been one thing after another. I've been following every detail all week. How have you been keeping up?
Mostly through you. There's so much ridiculousness being thrown around, and so I've been really just following with what you're posting.
Okay.
But I have been I have felt every emotion. I've been super optimistic, and then the next day I'm not. As soon as there was a press conference called, I was like, oh, they found them. Mm-hmm. And then the next hour I was like, oh, this, maybe this will never be solved. It's just, I'm so back and forth.
I never thought it would have gone on this long. In fact, I think when we did our first episode on Monday, I remember us saying hopefully this doesn't even make it through editing and release of the episode. Hopefully they're found and everything goes back to normal, and it was just a big misunderstanding. At this point, on Friday, a week after them being reported missing, it seems like that is certainly not going to happen. Certainly not going to be the case. This case is already, two missing children for over a week already defies statistics. When a child goes missing in Canada, there is a 62% chance the kid will be found within the first 24 hours, a 92% chance that the kid will be found within a week. And all that to say, when you look at missing kids in Canada and all the statistics related to it, the majority are teenagers and the overwhelming majority are runaways.
Yeah.
This certainly isn't a story of two runaway teenagers. This is a 4 and a 6-year-old in rural, remote even, Nova Scotia. The expectation is that these children wandered away from home and somehow didn't find their way back, as initially reported by their parents. The expectation was that they wandered away. But although they don't come out and say it, it seems like recent communication from the RCMP seems to be suggesting a change in the scope of the investigation. I figure what we'll do today is just go through the last week, Monday to today. We're recording this on Friday because in our first episode, we covered kind of the disappearance, the factors that led up to it and the events that led up to it, the initial timeline as it was known. And, there's been a whole lot since then. So we got a lot to get into.
For only 5 days, there has been a lot.
Mm-hmm.
going on. So,
Yeah, well,
or a lot of new things to
a lot
discuss,
of
I
little,
should say.
yeah, I shouldn't say little developments, a lot of big developments. Because again, at the time of our initial recording, we really had the publicly known version of the events as told by the parents and filtered through the media. We hadn't heard from the RCMP. That is something that's changed. The RCMP held a major press conference just 2 days ago that we're going to have a lot to say about that. Another major development we're going to talk about is the release or the public surfacing of what we'll call the dispatch call recordings. So you get a good sense, although we don't hear 911 calls and we don't hear much from the police, through the dispatcher call recordings, you get a sense of the response, what information was coming in and being circulated to search and rescue, the drone operators, the police. You hear them describe the public communications, such as the initial vulnerable persons report. So we got a lot to talk about on the dispatch call recordings, the press conference.
So are dispatch calls, like, are all of them just like public record, or only the like maybe higher profile
It's
situations are released?
It's all public record, the dispatch call recordings. If the emergency is involved, let's say if it's a police if it's the RCMP responding to an emergency in a metropolitan area, they're probably using digital radio to communicate with each other, and all that stuff is going to be encrypted and people won't have access to it. But when they get outside of the city, like in Portapic, or in this case here in Pictou, they're on kind of traditional radio that anyone can have access to, and generally they're going to use pre-existing radio channels in that area. So in this case, when they were responding to the disappearance of Jack and Lily, they were using a Pictou-based emergency radio station for kind of like fire and search and rescue purposes. So that was the radio stations that they were using, and and all of that stuff is recorded and archived on a couple different websites. But when you take the full day's worth of recordings when they responded to Lily and Jack's disappearance, and you just kind of boil it down to the most interesting and telling moments, you have some interesting updates, and we'll go through that today. I picked out kind of the most interesting and telling parts of the entire day's dispatching.
Noteworthy.
The other things we're going to update on and talk about is a lot of stuff involving statements made by not so much the mother, but by Lily and Jack's stepfather. We're going to learn a little bit about the breakdown of this family, which is something we talked about on our first episode, but we've learned a lot more since. And then we'll go into all the different theories and consider the information that's surfaced over the last week and how it works for or against the different theories. But before we get into that, I want to just ask you right off the bat, at this point, do you have a theory on what happened to these kids? Is there one you're leaning towards? Is there one that you can't kind of look away from?
I think that they perhaps did just wander away, and we underestimate how unforgiving the elements are. And yeah, and I hate to compare it to other cases, but there have been other cases where, a child goes missing, everyone points their fingers at their parents, and then they're found months later, and they did indeed they drowned, or they somehow succumbed to the elements. So unfortunately, and we'll get into this, but the possibility of them being alive is slim, which is so unfortunate.
Yeah, it is. And let's maybe get into a bit of the sense of what's happening online. You said yourself you're avoiding TikTok and YouTube and hopefully Facebook as well. The movement against the parents at this point, it is almost cult-like, where people are completely convinced that the parents did something to them. The jury of the public has already found them guilty 100 times over, it seems.
And the vast majority of the jury of the public, even if it's found that there was no foul play, the parents are completely innocent, they won't buy it.
That's kind of how
there's
I feel.
a large fraction that'll be like, oh no, no, that they're hiding something. There's a big cover up afoot.
A cover up, yeah. This reminds me a little bit, like the way this is all playing out and the way the discourse is unfolding online reminds me a lot of when the young woman was found dead in the oven in the Walmart here in Halifax.
Yes.
It was like it immediately it was a murder, and it was because of her race, and her mother did it. Like, and it was rampant online. There were videos made about it and everything else. And yeah, those people were never convinced. I have a feeling this is I'm just seeing it unfold in the exact same way. And it's, yeah, in a way, I've lost a bit of my faith in humanity.
Yeah.
But I think whatever faith I had, but anyway, all this to say is that the online discussion surrounding this case is just horrifying. A lot of information, to me, seems to be intentionally twisted and manipulated in a way to be a bit more sensational and make the parents look bad. And a lot of it is being driven and fueled by content creators. I've seen so many videos that even the thumbnail, I'm just like, oh my God, like you're just running wild with this. In fact, when we get to the dispatch recordings, we'll talk a little bit about this, but I've seen a lot of examples of people taking things out of context intentionally to make it appear that the parents, like a gotcha moment against the parents.
Yeah.
And that's pretty sad to see in the case of 2 missing children.
Well, I don't know if it's just our generation, if you will. We're the true crime generation.
It's true.
And like a lot of high profile cases are sensationalized, and people jump to the sensationalized true crime right away. Like I get it. Parents do harm their own children. It's happened. It will happen again, unfortunately. But not every missing child case is like that. Like it's,
well,
and as much as people want to believe it is, it's not.
Yeah. And again, when I mentioned the statistics earlier, you can read statistics for missing persons cases in Canada, and you can drill down to missing children in Canada. And statistically, again, when you look at the amount of missing children in Canada, it's something like 75% of them are like teenage runaways.
Yeah.
After that, you have a huge amount of them. The next, most significant percentage of them are people who've just got lost or wandered away or were at their friend's house and didn't check in. These kinds of situations that are you generally solve within, a couple hours or within a day. If you get down to abductions, I think the most recent number was 2017's data. I think there were 41,000-ish missing children cases. I think it was 130 involved in abduction. And of them, it was like 120 of that 130 were parental abductions, one parent or the other, who were in the middle of a custody dispute or custody battle in most cases, which then leads you to stranger abductions, which a lot of people think are way more common than they are. Stranger abductions, fortunately, in Canada are incredibly rare. And when they do happen, they're almost exclusively in large metropolitan areas, like large cities, Toronto, Vancouver, Ottawa, something like that. It would be incredibly, incredibly rare for a stranger abduction to happen in a remote area in Nova Scotia with this one home on the side of a highway somewhere.
That's true.
But let's talk about the updates, and then we can get into our thoughts on some of these theories, or more in-depth thoughts on some of these theories. Let's take a short break, and then we'll start. So, Madeleine, of all of the updates on this case over the past week, I think the most significant and the most discussion progressing and game-changing was that the RCMP unexpectedly held a press conference just this past Wednesday, their first press conference on this case. It was unique from the very start. When they did it, they sent out the press invite Wednesday morning. It had a, I can't think of what the word is, but they basically said, like, we're doing a press conference at 2:00. Don't say anything to anyone about it before like 1:30. I've never seen them do that before. I don't know if it's maybe just they know how feverish the discussion online is. Maybe they didn't want to fuel rumors that, we made a discovery or something. So maybe they just wanted to make it happen. That's all I can think of. But
that's probably why.
Yeah. Needless to say, they held their first press conference, and going into it, I thought it was either going to be we've made a significant discovery, or it was going to just be a recap of what they've done so far and just kind of like a touch in with the public. The third possibility I thought was the chance that, at that point, after 5 or 6 days of searching, I was thinking they may be about to announce that they're scaling back the search. I'm going to play a short global news clip that covered the press conference, and in it you will hear what information they shared, and then we can talk about it. Here comes the clip.
After 6 days of bushwhacking, scouring culverts and ravines, climbing over downed trees and wading through waist-deep water, the RCMP announced Wednesday that they are scaling back the search for Lily and Jack Sullivan.
As of today, May 7th, the active search efforts to locate Lily and Jack will be scaled back. We're transitioning from a full-scale search to searches in more specific spaces that have already been searched by our teams. We want to circle back to increase the probability that all clues have been found. And when transitioning from an active search to a scaled-back search, the probability of survival is taken into consideration. I want to assure you that our missing persons investigation continues. We're not packing up, and we're not giving up.
An announcement the children's stepfather could see coming.
I mean, they can only do so much. They're running on as much sleep as I am. They've been over so many times with helicopters, drones, dogs. I mean, they're doing everything they can, just like me and my family are doing everything we can.
Martel adds him and his family have been working closely with the RCMP to assist in their investigation outside of the search effort.
They've gone through the house, they've gone around the property with dogs. I've given them everything they wanted. I gave them my phone. I asked for polygraph exams.
RCMP says this remains a missing persons investigation, but conceded the likelihood of survival after several days exposed to the elements is slim.
Based on the experts and the review of the facts, the inclement weather, the time frames, and their age, the likelihood that they're alive right now is very low.
But that doesn't mean officers are done searching the woods. A scaled-back search means volunteers will be leaving the site by end of day, handing all further search responsibilities over the RCMP, who will continue to monitor the situation and are considering cadaver dogs but haven't called them in at this point. Meanwhile, Major Crimes is pursuing all other leads as they continue to come up.
When it comes to a missing person, we have to automatically consider are there people that have different charter implications and things like that, so we will automatically start to consider what evidence is pointing us towards a suspicious in nature.
Despite the discouraging news, the community in Pictou County remains hopeful.
I was told by a firefighter after day 2 that we've covered every square inch of that place. Well, the 4 more days, they've crisscrossed that area so much. And to my understanding, nothing has been found. People in Pictou County very much want to know if they're not in that woods, then they want to know what happened.
I want to start by saying they did that press conference on Wednesday. They should have done it sooner. There was so much public interest in this case, both locally, across the province, across the country, international attention on this story. I was surprised and shocked the RCMP waited that long to hold a press conference. They waited until the point that they were willing to say, we think it's unlikely that these children are alive. I think they should have been in front of this from the very beginning when it's 2 missing children. They're not found after the first night. I think that's the time to hold like daily press briefings. To wait this long,
Okay.
I thought that was wrong.
I don't really have any value add. I can't tell you when there should and shouldn't be a press conference, but what I do know is that we as the public, in my opinion, I shouldn't say we know. In my opinion, we are not entitled to information as they find it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Like,
people
this
expect
is-
that, but I even think just briefings that are giving numbers and daily updates. We've searched this amount of space. We have this many people, just to keep the flow of information coming, at least to an extent. It almost reminds me, or maybe I'm considering, when COVID and all that stuff was happening here in Nova Scotia, we had like daily briefings where they were giving numbers and stats and all this stuff. I almost feel
That's
like
true.
for a major case like this, as it's unfolding, that should happen. And I think for them to wait this long, and the first thing they come out with publicly is they call it a press conference, but really it could have been a press release. Like it seemed like they had a certain amount of stuff they wanted to say. They get up on, stage or whatever you want to call it, the podium, and they just kind of recite their piece of what the information they wanted to give. They allow questions from the media, but they weren't answering any questions because it was just really this performative version of a press release. And ultimately what they end up saying is that we've searched to the point that we think, given their age, the weather, equipment or clothing they would have, we think it is unlikely that the children are still alive. We're going to scale back our search. And when they say scale back, it seems like it almost had a double meaning. For one, they're going to reduce the amount of searchers and scale it back in that way. But another way they're going to scale it back is they're going to begin backtracking, doubling back and searching targeted areas that they initially searched for fear that maybe they had to miss something. And I imagine the type of targeted areas would be like bodies of water or especially troublesome areas to search. And one thing I was told, like I've spoke to several people who live in that area and know that forest well. And I've been told that like to call it like difficult terrain is grossly understating it. It's hilly. It's very rocky, so there's lots of like almost like pseudo caves, just like little like pockets where someone could easily fall into a little like small cavern or whatever you want to call it. There's lots of like almost like natural sinkholes and what would appear to be like old wells and such. So there is a lot of areas someone could get lost in that woods. But that said, this is two people, so even if one of the two fell in something and couldn't get out, the chances the other one would end up in there, I think, is lower. So,
but what we have to remember is it's two children,
yeah.
And if one fell in, the other would try and help the other one.
Yeah, so, and that goes for like a hole or a sinkhole, but also I guess for a body of water. And
in our previous episode, I asked like, is there any water around there? And you were like, this is Nova Scotia. There's water everywhere.
Yeah,
but that's something that I haven't heard mentioned a lot in press releases or whatever. They say like, yes, we're searching, like there's ground searches, there's drone searches, blah blah blah. But like, have any bodies of water been dragged or
yeah, well, that's I say after the press conference, there was a lot of questions from the media that the police, the RCMP, wouldn't answer, and some of them can't answer. Yeah, wouldn't, can't, shouldn't, whatever. It's some of the questions were about searching water. But that said, the children's stepfather, Daniel Martel, throughout this whole experience, he's been the one giving the most information to the media. He has spoke to the media countless times, and he actually had told that divers on Thursday, so yesterday from our recording, that there were divers in Lansdowne Lake, which is a significant body of water near the home. He told Globe and Mail that there were divers searching that lake. The media then asked RCMP to confirm that, and they denied to comment on that. But I have no reason to not believe him because he would be privy to more information than the public would be. So it seems like there are targeted searches involving divers the day after this press conference. So, and that would only make sense, I think.
Yeah.
They made it clear as well that after, I think at the time of that press conference, like 6 days of searching, they have found absolutely no trace of these kids in the woods. No shoes, no boots, no jacket, no sweater, no backpack. Nothing was found. The only piece of evidence they found after all of that searching was something that they thought potentially could have been a boot print. They couldn't say if it is or if it isn't. They found something that they thought may be a boot print. They did a targeted search around that area and turned up nothing. So maybe it was, maybe it wasn't a boot print. All that to say, over 100 people searching day and night, dogs, drones, helicopters. They found nothing except for maybe a boot print. And I think that alone tells me the kids aren't out there.
No, and that's another reason that so much speculation and finger pointing is going to the parents, because there is nothing. Mm-hmm. It's as if they never were in the woods. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's so hard to say just trying to keep a neutral stance, and it's.
But what was interesting is they did kind of toy with the idea of it being more aggressively investigated as a major crime. That said, any missing persons case is considered suspicious and the major crime unit is involved. But when we heard the press conference, the person representing the major crimes unit did take the mic and spoke for a while, and it seems like he of course he wasn't willing to divulge anything, but it seems like he's pretty involved in the investigation and the search, which tells me, at least behind the scenes, the RCMP is taking it very seriously as a possible major crime, if we want to put it.
Well, of course. And what people need to realize is that right from the get-go, police are going to be going down every avenue they can. With any missing person, they're going to look at the parents, the spouse, whatever, but they're also going to do searches of, if the person says, yeah, they just wandered off, they're not just focusing their time into one possibility.
Yeah, that's true.
We are not entitled to information as they find it out. And it's an ongoing investigation. Of course, we're not going to know everything the police know.
A lot of what we're doing is reading between the lines. But again, as I mentioned, with Daniel Martel, the children's stepfather, he's been speaking to the media regularly. We haven't heard from the children's mother, Malaya Brooks Murray, since the very beginning. But Daniel Martel has revealed a lot. And if we want to consider how this is being investigated as a major crime, we only have to look at some statements that he made. This was, again, statements he made to the Globe and Mail. He had shared that on Tuesday night, he met with the RCMP's, I believe, major crimes unit for a 4-hour interview. And if you want to think, like, you could call it interview, you could call it interrogation. 4 hours is a long time to sit down and talk to cops. So I think whatever was going on in this discussion was pretty interesting. What he had shared is that during this 4-hour interview, they wanted him to walk them through exactly what he remembers the night before, the day of, the days leading up to. On Wednesday morning, so the next morning, the same day as the press conference, the officers returned to his home. They visited him at the home, and they took custody of his phone. He offered it. He said, like, he has offered everything. He says, I want to do a lie detector test, take my phone, give me a drug test. I have nothing to hide. Wednesday morning, the police took his phone. So it seems like what they're really trying to do is narrow down an exact timeline of everything and using digital evidence to back that up, such as a telephone would have.
And rest assured, they are also, even if the mother isn't in the house, they're also interviewing her, and they want to make sure stories are lining up. And and also people seem to forget that lie detector tests aren't permissible in court. Everyone was just screaming for polygraph tests, and I'm like, those are, for one, easily deceived, and two, they're not even, you can't even use them in court. But
generally the police in Nova Scotia, or I think in Canada, they generally don't even do polygraphs. Usually they're used, a polygraph, or the idea of taking a polygraph is used more as a bluff. Like if they're trying to get you to talk or trying to put you under pressure, they'll bring up a polygraph. But to actually do one, it's pretty unusual. It happens a lot less than people think. And a lot of times when polygraphs happen, it's not done through the police. It's like a private thing where you hire someone to do a polygraph.
Oh, okay.
It's
well, because it's not a tried and true.
Yeah, it's a waste of everyone's time, because no matter what the result of the polygraph is, it doesn't hold any water in court anyway.
No.
So it's what's the point? But I think the police, like, again, they haven't come out and said this to us, but knowing that this is happening behind the scenes, I think is reassuring that things are moving in the right direction and that they're looking at all angles of this case. And not, although they publicly are saying these kids wandered off and we're searching for them, they're considering all the other options.
And have since the beginning, rest assured.
Certainly. I do want to update on something as well. I don't even think we had planned this. Is in our prior episode we talked about, right before we went live, we had learned that Malia had left the home, had blocked Daniel on social media. We have learned a little bit more about that. It seems like, for all intents and purposes, a breakdown of this family. They had been together for about 3 years, Daniel and Malia. They have an 18-month-old baby, and of course,
16.
yeah, sorry, thank you for correcting me. They have a 16-month-old baby together, but all of this seems to have come to an end the morning after Lily and Jack were reported missing. What led to her leaving the home, and whether she blocked Daniel on social media or disabled all of her social media accounts, because it's hard to tell, like, did she block him or disable everything? Because it's six of one, half dozen of another to the most part. I guess saying blocked him sounds more targeted, but it does seem like she disabled a lot of her social media accounts. And I can completely understand why after reading a little bit online about this case. But it seems that what led to all this is that Malia's family came to Lansdowne Station to support them and assist in the search for Lily and Jack. But when they arrived, something got tense, and it led to Malia's family accusing Daniel of wrongdoing in some capacity and being involved in some way with the disappearance of Lily and Jack. So there was some kind of family dispute that led to Daniel's mother, who I believe owns the property, kicking Malia's family off of the property. I believe she called the police, and the police responded to this, but it seems like that is what led to her and her family leaving with their 16-month-old baby. So whatever happened, and we don't know, the public doesn't yet know what allegations her family made against Daniel. We just have a statement from him saying to the media, "My mother had to kick some people off the property because they were accusing me of being involved when I'm the only one here still fighting for these kids. It's really sad." So we can read between the lines. If he says, "accuse me of being involved," that may be being involved in something horrible. It could also be accusing me of, I don't know, being negligent and not looking after the kids and allowing them to wander off. But we don't know what they said, and I would really like to know that.
Me too.
It seems like this is a family breakdown the day after the disappearance of 2 children.
But that's also not like super surprising to me, because like, first, we don't know what the relationship was like before this. They could have been on the brink of breaking up as is, and then something like this happens. It would just, it would completely destroy them.
Certainly.
And you have to remember that even like the best relationships, something traumatic like the death of a child will break people up.
Hell yeah. Well,
it makes it either brings you closer together or completely tears you apart.
Well, if you think a lot of relationships, the big test is when you move in together. That's either going to make or break you. Imagine, starting a business with your partner. That would really be a test. But what's happening with this family, if things are as they seem and these 2 children wandered away, the amount of like stress and pressure, I would like to think that would bring you together to form a unified front and support each other. But humans being what they are, when they react to stress in different ways, someone says something in the heat of the moment that maybe they don't mean. I could see how this could happen, both in a you did something horrible way and just a blow up stress way. But
and everyone reacts to shock differently. Everyone grieves differently.
Yeah. I don't think we're going to learn much more about the dynamics of the family and that relationship at this point. Again, Daniel seems to be very forthcoming with the media, although we only see short sound bites, but there's many of them. So it seems like he's there involved in the search to the extent that you can. Like, they're not going to let anyone go running around in the woods and get hurt and trample over areas that hadn't been searched and stuff. But it seems like he's there and engaged with the searchers and is willing to talk to the media. When I watch it, like, I'm no expert, but to me, he seems sincere. I don't see anything within his body language or anything that makes me think like, this guy isn't just a desperate person wanting to help in any way he can. But again,
I saw
I'm no
lot
expert.
of overanalyzing on the way he talked about the kids in like a past tense.
Yeah, I've heard people saying that.
But it's, it's hard to say. Like it's just verbiage. Like,
Yeah, and not everyone's a comfortable public speaker too. So
no.
it's you don't even sometimes you just don't think and you just talk. You know what? I go back and listen to podcast episodes when I'm editing, and I'm just like, what am I even saying here?
Oh,
Imagine,
me too.
and that's me sitting comfortably with a tea in my spare bedroom. Imagine, in this traumatic moment, and and then you have so many people like micro analyzing the one sentence that the media uses. Again, these people, the parents, if they aren't guilty of any major crime at the end of this, oh man,
They deserve a lot of apologies from a lot of people.
yeah, but it's a lot will have to happen before we get to that point. But let's move on to the next development or moment to discuss. This one's going to be a lot to unpack. Right around the same time that the police held their press conference where they scaled back in the search and made it clear to the public that they were acting with the assumption that the children were no longer alive, it was around that point that the dispatch calls surfaced. I picked out some of the most interesting moments, and we're going to have a lot to talk about with these dispatch calls. Let's take a short break, and then we'll get into the many moments from the early moments of that search. So at the beginning of the episode, I explained what the dispatch call recordings are going to hear, but what the dispatch call recordings are. But imagine you're kind of like an operator sitting in a room with a bunch of phones in front of you, and you're using those phones to reach out to search and rescue, to the fire department, to the police, and organize how all of that's happening. You also have a connection to 911 call takers. So the dispatchers are kind of like the hub that all the information passes through. What we have access to is the dispatchers' recordings from that entire day. I've pulled out some of the most interesting moments, and let's just go through them. The first one that I want to talk about is, and this is something that's been referenced in the media a lot, is just how remote this area is and how that affects a search. So much searching involves, and so much of a police response involves cell phones. Cell phones, of course, can power our world at this point. But where these children were last seen, where they went missing from, there's no cell phone reception, and that has caused so many problems in the initial organization and communication that the dispatcher had to deal with. I want to play a short clip from the dispatch calls, and this is very early in the response. When they show up at the house, it's Malia, the children's mother, who gave the police photographs of the children with the plan of distributing them in the news and through press releases and all that. Like when you see a report of a missing person from a police force and there's a photograph of the missing person, oftentimes it's not the nicest photo, and that's because they just get the first one they can. Maybe it's one the mom has on the phone or the dad has on the phone, or maybe it's like a photograph in a glass frame on a table and the cop just takes a picture of it or something, and that gets distributed. But long story short, Malia gave photographs of the children to the cop, but the cop was having a hard time distributing them because there was no cell phone reception, and the dispatcher has to help him communicate with other kind of senior people within law enforcement to figure out, like, should I leave here and drive far enough away to get cell phone reception? But just listen to this, and this will just give you a sense of what they were dealing with.
All right, so there is no portable reception down here. However, the cars do work. So Constable Mason's vehicle now, she's got her radio on the loudhailer, so she'll be able to hear us. She has no phone reception, but she does have photo of the two kids. The 6-year-old is the girl, I believe, and she's wearing pink. The 4-year-old is wearing some blue dinosaur boots. Ask the risk manager if he wants Constable Mason to depart there to go get some phone service to send those images or not. The drone operator is still on scene with the mom, so
10-4. Sergeant Young, go somewhere and get service and get those photos sent out.
So what you hear there is the cop who just arrived on scene. There's already a drone operator there. Their cell phones have no service, but their car radio, he says the cars have service. They can talk through the radio, but since he's one of the first people there, he's like, should I like leave and, and send these photos? And the dispatcher instructs him to, I think, send another officer who was on the scene to drive far enough away to get service and send the photos. But that went on, the problem with cell phone reception went on to be a big issue with the initial search because of the way when they're coordinating all of this stuff, so many of them are using their phones. But I thought that was interesting, and for a few reasons. One, the cell phone problem is going to pop up a lot with a search and coordinating all this stuff. But also it shows you that from the very first moments, they already have a drone in the air looking for these kids. Although, according to the timeline, the police show up just after 10 o'clock. The children could have left any time from, say, 7:30, 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock. So the kids could still be about 2 hours away on foot through the thick woods, which probably isn't that far. But the police are coming out, guns a-blazing, already with a drone in the air. So I thought that was interesting.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And you'll hear a lot of things that, unlike Portapique, when there was the mass casualty in Portapique, these dispatch logs and calls showed us this disorganized, confused mess. In this case, I don't hear that at all. They seem to really be coordinated, communicating well and well organized. It's like a well-oiled machine that seemed to show up there and search. Let's go on to the next moment. This one is really interesting, and this one will, by airing this and discussing this, we can debunk some kind of nonsense that's being spread around. I've mentioned that there's been a problem with people taking facts and manipulating them and using them for clickbait or maybe as gotcha moments towards the parents or something. This next one involves that. The dispatcher calls the police on who are on scene doing the search to let them know that they just received a 911 call about a suspicious vehicle in the area. I'll let you hear the recording and then we'll talk a bit more about it.
Member is here on Garlock Road. We just had a 911 call. Can I go ahead with the details?
Yeah, go ahead.
So we had a call via 911 from a Karen Ponacau. Kindly about 5 minutes. She was reporting just driving past a black Honda CRV, Nova Scotia marker Golf Mike Fox 320 that left the outdoor recreational park close to the residence. It is permanently closed. Complaint is unsure if related, but it felt a bit strange to her. Driver was a white male around 50 years old, bald with a mustache. And it left from 1480 Garlock Road. I can send that around to your MWS if it's easier.
So pretty simple. What the dispatcher is saying is we just got a call from someone who saw a black SUV, a black Honda CRV, pulling out of kind of a permanently closed recreational area. They thought it was a little suspicious, so they wanted to call it in because at this point, people in this community know what's going on and know there's a search. Now, where the kind of disinformation comes into play is I've seen a whole bunch of people online talking about this 911 call and using this suspicious vehicle as a way to promote like the abduction theory.
And dogpile onto that rhetoric.
Yeah, but here's the thing, is if you continue listening to the dispatcher for the next, I think it's about 15 or 20 minutes later, you get this update.
Remember there in Garlock Road, if you can copy this there, Corporal Short contacted that complainant from that suspicious vehicle call, and everything was done for, nothing suspicious about it.
Go for copies.
So in the 911 call, they had the license plate number. They found the car, talked to whoever the person was that owned it or was driving it. Nothing suspicious, end of story. But if you go searching, you can find people like using edited versions of that in a salacious way, which reminds me of when everything happened at the Walmart in Halifax with the woman who was found dead in the oven. There were people who were using clips of like video of Walmarts, like not the Walmart where this happened, just like a video of random people in Walmart, and they overdubbed the sounds of like screaming and stuff, and it was being shared online as if someone was in the Walmart when this happened and filmed it all. This kind of reminded me a little bit of that, like just taking something and manipulating it in such a way to, you know, get clicks and be salacious. But that 911 call, that was, yeah, there's nothing suspicious about that black CRV. But that will lead us to the next point is the people in the community know what's going on. They know there's a search for kids and they're willing to help. Another person calls the police with an offer to help. And I think this one's pretty interesting as well. This is a neighbor who is offering assistance. Listen to this.
Well, you just got a call from a Justin Smith who lives close by to where you guys are now. He said he can talk to members about any vehicles that passed on Highway 289. If you guys need to get a hold of them, I can always send this number down to you guys if needed.
So what it is it's someone who's offering to talk to the police about any vehicles that drove by the highway. And now this house is on a highway, so any vehicles coming or going from the Sullivan's kids' property would have to travel this road. Just what I'm thinking in this call is if someone's willing to talk to the police about any vehicles, could it just be like a Ring video doorbell? Maybe they have at this point already a video of every car going by. Like, I know that's speculating, but why else would you call the police other than you have like a video or something of it?
Right. Well, you'd hope that someone wouldn't just want to like inject themselves into an investigation like that, and that had to have been one of the first things people did.
Yeah.
Or excuse me, one of the first things police did. Who's
yeah.
got video? Who's got
Absolutely.
surveillance of the area?
Yeah. And anyone who has like a Ring video doorbell, if your front door faces the street, it's annoying because you get like an alert and a short video every time a car goes by. So I think in my mind, I'm pretty comfortable saying it's something like that.
Yeah, absolutely it is. And just with like the whole vehicle thing, we talked about this a little bit before we started recording. One of my biggest pet peeves in this whole all of the speculation and rumors flying around are the people throwing the words human trafficking around, because it completely, like, not everything is human trafficking. And it's just like, if you look at all the facts, the actual facts, that's not what this is.
And the statistics.
So we need to stop that.
Yeah. Human trafficking isn't necessarily what a lot of people think it is. It's very rare that there would be an abduction and for the purpose of human trafficking.
And we're not saying it doesn't happen, but it's not the 90% of human trafficking. No.
Like we said, is when you look at the likelihood of a stranger of abduction of a child in Canada, it is incredibly rare, and it's almost exclusive to metropolitan areas where you have large groups of people in a city. It would be very unlikely that this involves a stranger abduction. Not impossible, but if you're going to speculate just based on assumptions and stuff, I guess it's probably best to stick with the stats, and statistically that's highly unlikely. Let's go back to the next moment in the dispatch call I want to share with you. This just speaks to the response that the search and rescue team had to the disappearance of these two children. This moment from the dispatch call is only about 2.5 hours after the police first arrive on the scene, and they're giving updates on how many other search and rescue members are on their way to search. And it gives a good sense of the scope of how all hands on deck this search was. Listen to this.
The search with the road of our building here, we've got all of our equipment on the go, and 22 members should land on site about 1:30, a little before, hopefully.
And for that's great, thank you.
Was that you I heard on here that was going to do a search of the residence again?
Yeah, that's what he was saying. They were going to do the property and the residence again.
Copy that.
So just, I know it's hard to hear, but what you hear there is just a little over 2 hours after the first few cops and drone operators arrived on the scene. They had a team of 22 people showing up. And this is also important because a lot of people talk as if they didn't search the property well. They're already planning to do their second search of the house and the property. So this isn't the kind of thing where the cops showed up and they just walked off into the woods. They went through the house and the grounds with a fine-tooth comb because most likely the kids are very close to home. So they expanded out from there. So even at that point, at about 1:30, they were doing their second full search of the home, a different officer, with another 22 search and rescue members showing up. So it's, it's a pretty quick response, I would think. We hear so many stories of someone complaining that they weren't taken seriously when they reported someone missing. That is not the case here.
No, it was not only quick, but thorough, which just fuels the conspiracy theories because why has nothing been found?
Mm-hmm.
Not a shoe, not a jacket, a maybe boot print. Like it just doesn't make sense that not one trace of either of these poor kids has been discovered.
Yeah, and it was in the wood. Like, it may not be wet on the street or on your front lawn, but when you go in the woods, it's muddy and boggy because the sun doesn't, get to the ground to dry it out as much. There should be a trail of footprints
somewhere.
I'm going to play the last moment from the dispatch calls. This one is another example of another moment in the dispatch calls that a lot of people have taken completely out of context. In fact, I found a video on YouTube that had over 100,000 views that used this moment out of context to make it seem that the police, when they arrived on the scene, were suspicious of the mother. I saw a YouTube video that had a thumbnail with a picture of the mother, and it said something like, dispatch logs released. And then in this kind of like horror font, it said, "Don't let her leave the house." So listen to what they actually said, because that video and other videos I saw on TikTok that were just like kind of copying it, we're giving people the idea that the RCMP, when they showed up, they were not letting Malia leave the scene. But here's what actually happened. It's a very early moment in the search. There's only a couple cops there and a drone operator at the time. And here's what happens.
Just make sure Mom stays close to the house there in case they happen to sneak out and get back into the house.
It's very short, but what they're saying is, if you cops are going to go out into the woods and search, make sure the mother stays there. So that way, if the kids come back and go in the house, we know they're in there and we're not going to continue searching. Because the fear, like, they're still on the assumption that the kids are near the home. The fear is if they all leave the house and they're searching in the woods, if the kids come home and get back in the house, we're not going to know that.
Right.
So what they were saying is keep the mom close to the house. So that way, if the kids come home, she can see them and get them and problem solved.
Yeah. But when you take teeny little sound bites and twist it into something it's not. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So all in all, the dispatch logs, we heard the most interesting moments, but really you hear for hours them planning the roads they're searching, the routes they're taking, coordinating the different drone operators and dogs and the different teams that are coming in. But in the end, as we know now, over a week later, nothing is found in the first day. Nothing has been found since. And it's only gotten darker and more concerning, to the point now that we've already had a press release where the police made it clear that they don't believe the children are still alive. But what we can talk about now is some of the additional theories. So I think we talked about the abduction hypothesis enough. I don't think either of us are, like, I think if someone abducts a kid, it's most likely one of the parents and there's a custody dispute and all that. I think it's safe to say Daniel or Malia haven't abducted the kid.
Yeah, I'd put a vital organ on it. But yeah, the internet would have something different to say.
Well, I think the internet thinks they did something to them and are covering it up, not that they've abducted them, so to speak. if there was any kind of foul play, I think at least Daniel is he's putting his face out there quite a bit, and that would surprise me. But that said, people can find examples of people going on TV and seeking public support for, the search for someone they had already murdered.
Absolutely.
That does happen.
Yeah.
It's rare, but it
And
happens.
it's some of the, and I don't even know if these are like actual facts, but the whole were the kids at school the whole week debacle. So according to many people, the kids weren't seen at all from Tuesday to Friday. So that gives a good grace period for something to happen, to get rid of them, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah. And the police, like the public doesn't know a lot about when the kids were seen. The public knows that the children weren't in school Tuesday. Wednesday was an in-service day, so there was no school. Thursday, the kids weren't in school, and they wouldn't have been going to school Friday. It was said that Lily had a cough, but for whatever reason, they weren't in school all week. We know they were there Monday and seen Monday because one of the kids, like someone who worked at the school, went on Facebook and shared their account of seeing Lily at school on Monday. And by looking at her profile, she seemed legit, so there's reason to believe she's legit. So I think it's safe to say Monday they were seen. We don't really have anyone who after that came out and said, anyone trustworthy and verified that came out and said that they saw the kids since then. But that said, the police would have spoke to so many people at this point that they would have a pretty good idea. Like the police would have a really good idea or know exactly when they were last seen by someone other than the parents, of course.
Right. Like that would be one of the first things that they would probably try and do.
And they're not going to tell the public.
No, absolutely not. A new theory that I just came across today was that there was a big party at the house on Wednesday or Thursday. There were so many cars, and I don't know, that somehow
plays into it,
makes the parents suspicious.
Yeah, well, there's been a lot of like kind of discussion and allegation online that makes it seem as though drugs are involved in this.
Yes.
Coincidentally, if you're on income assistance, you would have got paid the 28th or 29th of April. So just like a couple days before this all happened. And a lot of people are saying like, see, they would have got the money and then this drug bender and all this stuff.
Oh.
But all that to say, when people say these things, like, oh, there was a bunch of cars there. Who actually said it?
Right.
Like, does anyone know? Like, do they have
Says
a picture?
who?
Or like, says who? Someone on Facebook.
Yeah.
Oh, like, someone, like, no, someone in the comments of some random clickbait said that they heard.
Daryl on Facebook, whose profile picture is an old truck. He said it.
Yeah. Okay. My thing, like, if someone tells me anything and they're like, I heard it on Facebook, I assume that they're talking about a psychic on YouTube. That's how seriously I heard it on Facebook. So all of these allegations against the parents, the majority of them, and the majority of the information associated with the allegations seem to involve someone on Facebook said it. And I'm like, oh, did you are they legit? Did they have a photo? Or is it just, it's like this dystopian game of telephone.
Yes. I'm wondering if, let's say they are unfortunately found in a pond. Let's just speculating.
Yeah. Let's call it an accidental death.
Yes. Okay. Perfect. Do you think the parents would ever get charged with like negligence?
I don't know. And is it negligent? Like, would it be against the law, like to sleep in and allow a 4 and 6-year-old to kind of play around the house?
I know. Like, and as a child of the 90s, that was, that was just a regular weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Our parents sleeping in and
like,
us doing our thing.
I guarantee, well, not even just the 90s, I guarantee in houses all across Canada, there's 4-year-olds who get up and grab an iPad and watch YouTube on the couch while their parents sleep in a little bit.
Yeah. It's not an uncommon thing.
I don't know if it would meet the threshold of like criminal negligence.
No, I bet you're right. That I was just wondering. You just made a good point. It's like, they just got up and were kind of doing their thing. It doesn't mean they were neglected.
I would be, yeah.
It's just such an unfortunate series of events. Like the domino effect of
Yeah.
everything that's happened is just so truly terrible. And I really, really hope that whatever happened, the outcome isn't good. And I hope that it's not even darker than that.
Yeah. What I really hope is that there is some kind of explanation, both for the sake of these parents to know what happened, for all of Lily and Jack's loved ones and schoolmates and teachers to know what happened. The idea that that they're never found and this is never explained, like that's horrific.
Yeah.
Every outcome is horrific, to be honest, other than them being found alive. And if the RCMP is willing to say in a press conference they're not expecting that, then they're not going to say that lightly.
No, absolutely not. And I very briefly mentioned this last episode, but there was that little boy that went missing in Saskatchewan a few years ago, and he was found 81 days later and unfortunately drowned. So, and it was like 5 kilometers from where he went missing or something, and in a place that had been searched. So it's like stranger things have happened. They unfortunately, it might take a while, but they will hopefully be found.
Yeah.
And
well, one thing to talk about them being found, one thing to say is I didn't realize this until the press conference that the RCMP held, is there are two types of like dogs, search dogs that search for people. There's a type that search for living people, and those are the kind where you give them like, your kid's blanket and they run off and follow that scent and find your kid. There's a whole different type of search dog that's a separate specialty that are cadaver dogs that specifically smell deceased people. At this point, the RCMP have yet to use cadaver dogs, but they said during the press conference that that's their likely next step. If the children are out there and no longer with us, the cadaver dog may be what solves the mystery at this point.
I believe the only issue with cadaver dogs is, and I could be wrong, so just take this as you will, I think they will sniff out any sort of death, like a raccoon.
Yeah.
Or if someone was hunting in the area, or but I could be wrong. I'm sure human remains are very different than animal.
Yeah.
Even the scent.
Yeah. And regardless, I think the area that the cadaver dogs would be searching is probably not a large area. Like this search that the search and rescue team did was several kilometers wide. I don't think that's necessary. Like I thought from the beginning, if these kids managed to get over 1 kilometer away, I'd be shocked, because if kids if kids are lost in the woods, they're not walking a straight line. They're doing these meandering circles. So for the children to walk 1 kilometer away from the house, they actually probably had to walk like 2.5 kilometers, because they're walking in, circles and, avoiding hills and water and all this sort of stuff. So the idea that they got, 3.5 kilometers away, to me never sat well.
I also, something I just found, I don't know, maybe interesting about a question asked at the press conference on Wednesday. So they're scaling back the search and they're focusing more on specific areas, but they said that only cops are going to be searching now, and all of the like trained professional search and rescue people are all going home. There was 160 of them. You'd think they'd keep like 30 of them or something and let.
I think it's a different kind of thing though. Like the search and rescue team would be doing like a grid search where they're mapping out an area and they're like very like methodically going through this grid. So I think if it's just these targeted searches, like, we're going to do this lake, it's probably like a diver and 2 guys,
Yes.
That sort of thing. So I think the type of search, the targeted searches we're seeing now is probably more likely cadaver dogs, divers, very small little specialized groups like that.
I bet you're right. Well, because, and like to be a part of the search and rescue team, like my dad was, I don't know if he still is, a part of the RCMP search and rescue team. He works for the RCMP. He was a carpenter. He does something else now. But like you really just have to be within the RCMP to be qualified to get on the search and rescue team. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. All this to say, there's been a lot going on over the past week. This case is still has like a stranglehold on the public attention. It's local, it's provincial, it's national, it's international. People all over the world are talking about this case, and I think that's because people don't want to stand for an injustice against children, and a lot of people are discussing this case in the context of foul play being committed against these kids. It's a mystery, as we're talking about now, that it's so hard to say what could have happened, and that attracts people. But I don't know, something about this case. It's gone far and wide. It's kind of I don't know if it's a good thing or not, because I don't know how much help it's doing, but at least the public interest will make sure that the authorities cross their T's and dot their I's.
That's if anything good comes of this, maybe that's it.
Well, let's put a bow on our 1 week later discussion. I have a feeling this coming week is going to be a lot to talk about as well. So I don't believe this will be the last time we're discussing this case. And hopefully, like I would love to end this with good news, but my the hope within me is very slim. Any solution that ends with them being alive is the best case scenario.
Absolutely.
Below that, I think, is just an answer.
Some sort of explanation.
One way or another, yeah. I want to thank you for joining us for this episode of Nighttime. Before I end here, I want to send positive vibes to everyone affected by this case. I also want to send a sincere thank you to everyone searching for Jack and Lily. It's truly a nightmare scenario, and I think everyone out there feels the same way I do. When a kid goes missing, everything else takes second priority. I also would like to caution people to double, if not triple, vet every piece of information that they come across online. A case like this can bring out the best and the worst in people, and some of the rumors I've come across are about as horrific as they are illogical, and that won't do anyone any good. So let's try to stick to the facts. I think it's quite obvious, but this is a quickly developing story, and a lot more is probably about to surface. I'm going to do my best to provide update episodes as these developments take place. But that said, if anyone close to the story would like to speak with me, please get in touch. We can make that happen. Now, with all that said, I'm going to start wrapping up this episode, but before we part, I have a few thanks to pass out. A big thanks to Monty Data, who contributes the music for this show, and Linz from the Dystopian Simulation podcast, who provides my intro and outro voiceovers. And then lastly, but most importantly, a massive thank you goes out to each and every one of you listening to Nighttime, as without your interest and your support, this show would be as pointless as it would be impossible. And on the topic of support, let me thank the newest subscribers to the premium feed, George, Head to Heels, and Gail. We appreciate you. And for anyone else who'd like to support the show, you can help us out here in a variety of ways. First of all, a premium feed subscription costs just a couple bucks a month, and that money funds the creation of the show. But the premium feed will also give you the show 2 days early, give it to you ad-free, and give you access to a back catalog of episodes. If that sounds like something you're interested in, you can go premium at nighttimepodcast.com/subscribe. And even if you don't want to go premium, you can still support the show by sharing this episode on social media and letting all your like-minded friends know when they should listen. Your support is very much appreciated. Now, with that said, until next time, take care of each other, hug your loved ones tight, and keep Lily and Jack in your thoughts. They need all the help they can get.
The Nighttime Podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Jordan Bonaparte.